Life Boy shampoo cuti ₹70.
Tonight, high security. Military presence increases across the city as the police are given go-ahead to shoot. The explanation. The Defense Secretary says that investigations will uncover who is behind the attacks, adding that no military rule is on the cards. Keeping a close eye. The United States says it is closely monitoring military deployments in Sri Lanka.
As I said before, also closely monitoring the deployment of troops, something that is of concern to us, and we're also closely following political developments in the situation on the ground in Sri Lanka.
The ultimatum. The central bank governor says he's ready to go if no political stability is reached soon. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday, the 11th of May, 2022.
Introducing New Hellmann's, the world's #1 mayonnaise brand, now in Sri Lanka.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, you're watching First at 9 with me, David Ebert. Now, the island-wide curfew in effect will be lifted tomorrow at 7 a.m. and will be reimposed again at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Thereafter, it will be in effect until 6 a.m. on Friday, the 13th of May. Today, Triforce personnel deployed in the streets continued in their efforts to maintain peace across the country during the curfew period that was announced last Monday. Despite the curfew, peaceful protests at the Golfers Green worked off for the 33rd consecutive day, demonstrating that the fight is not over just yet.
Today marks another day that country stays under curfew that was imposed to quell the violence that erupted after peaceful protests in Colombo were attacked last Monday. The curfew that was supposed to be lifted at 7 this morning was extended until 7 a.m. tomorrow. According to the President's Media Division, the curfew will be lifted tomorrow at 7 a.m. and will be reimposed again at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Thereafter, it will be in effect until 6 a.m. on Friday, the 13th of May. Until then, military personnel from the Army, Air Force and Navy deployed in their hundreds across the streets continue to protect peace throughout the island. All vehicles entering and leaving Colombo have been subjected to constant checks by them during the day. According to the President's Media Division, the public is being urged to stay away from all public roads, railways, public parks, sports grounds and even from the seashore without a written permit from an authorized officer. However, despite the curfew, the mass protest at the Golfers Green calling on the president to resign continues, showing that their fight is not remotely close to being over. Although attempts were made by the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna supporters to repress this peaceful battle on Monday, the unity and the energy of the protesters saw the damaged Gotagogama site being rebuilt in a show of determination against threats of violence. Today marked the demonstration's 33rd day. Larger crowds were seen at the site today expressing their objections to the head of state. At the site, some members of the Buddhist clergy continue a hunger strike calling on the president to resign immediately. In the meantime, fuel distribution that came to a halt following the imposition of the island-wide curfew began normalizing from this afternoon. The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation said that steps were taken to issue fuel stocks to bowsers throughout the day. Meanwhile, the Department of Examinations has noted that the GCE Ordinary Level Examinations for the year 2021 that is scheduled to begin on the 23rd of May will be held as planned. The department said that necessary arrangements have been made for the exam to take place from the 23rd of May to the 1st of June. The candidates who are yet to receive their admissions by tomorrow are instructed to contact the examinations department without delay.
Now, rejecting rumours of plans to install military rule in the country, Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne says that investigations are underway to determine who was behind the violence in the past few days. He added that once the probes are concluded, it won't matter which political or revolutionary party is found behind the violence. Action will be taken to prevent Sri Lanka turning into a state of lawlessness. Speaking at a media briefing today, Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne offered a long explanation on the current state of emergency and what he termed was the actual picture behind the violence in the recent days. Alluding to the island-wide curfew and the lethal force authorization, he explained that painful decisions were taken by the President for the Defence Ministry to carry out. He explained that all this was done to prevent the country from becoming a failed state and referred to today's tweet from Indian BJP politician Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, where he called for Indian intervention to prevent a new Libya in the neighbourhood. He explained that the sudden outbreak of violence targeting the government and opposition parliamentarians will be investigated by the Defence Ministry to identify organised saboteurs.
විපක්ෂ නායක සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාස මහත්මයාත් පැමිණියා. එතුමා මොන දේශපාලන පක්ෂයකට අයත් වුණත් එතුමා මේ රටේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ විපක්ෂ නායකතුමා. එතුමාට ඇතිවෙච්ච ප්‍රහාරය ඔබ සියලු දෙනාම දකින්න ඇති. ඒවා අපිට අනුමත කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් නෙමෙයි. ඒ වගේම තවත් දේශපාලකයන් ඒ අවස්ථාවේ එතෙන්ට ගියා. ඒ අයට එහෙම කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් තිබුණේ නැහැ. ඉතින් විපක්ෂ නායකතුමාට පහර දෙන්නත් තවත් දේශපාලකයෙකුට නිදහසේ හිතේ හැටියට එහා මෙහා යන්නත් පුළුවන්කම තිබුණා නම් ඒ කියන්නේ ඒකෙත් මොකක් හරි අරුතක් ඇති. අපි ඉදිරියේදී පොලිසිය මගින් මේ ගැන සම්පූර්ණ පරීක්ෂණ පවත්වලා මේ දකින්න තියෙන CCTV දර්ශන උපයෝගී කරගෙන මොන පක්ෂයේද ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂයේද විරුද්ධ පක්ෂයේද එහෙම නැත්නම් විප්ලවවාදී පක්ෂයේද ඒවා කිසි දෙයක් අපි ගණන් ගන්නෑ. වැරද්ද කළා තියෙනවා නම් ඒ වැරදිකරුවන් කෙලෙස හෝ නීතිය හමුවට පමුණවන්න අපි කටයුතු කරනවා. ඒ සඳහා ඒ වීඩියෝ දර්ශන ලයිව් ස්ට්‍රීම් වලින් දීපුවා. ඒ හැම දෙයක්ම අපි ගාව තියෙනවා.
The Defence Secretary was then asked to comment on reports of moves by the government to establish military rule, with people on social media expressing concerns over the massive military presence across the city.
මේ රටේ කවදාවත් එහෙම හමුදා පාලනයක් ඇති වෙලත් නැහැ. එකම එක පාරක් 1960 ගණන් වල නැත්නම් 70 ගණන් පොඩි try එකක් දීලා තිබුණා. පළවෙනියයි දෙවෙනියයි තුන්වෙනියයි කට්ටිය එකතු වෙලා හිටන් සාකච්ඡා කරා, plan කරා, ඔක්කොම වැඩසටහන තිබුණේ. මට මතකද දෙවෙනිය නැත්නම් තුන්වෙනිය කියලා දුන්නා කියලා. ඔන්න අරුන් කරන්න හදනවා කියලා. ඉතින් ඒ කියන්නේ මේ රටේ හරි අමාරුයි ඒ වගේ එකක් කරන්න. බය වෙන්න එපා හමුදා පාලනේ නැහැ කවදාවත්. වගකීමෙන් කියන්නේ.
Also at the briefing was Army Commander General Chavendra Silva, who was asked to explain where the military's loyalties lie in a toss-up between the people of Sri Lanka and the elected president.
Of this country being elected by the people. So there's a procedure in Sri Lanka according to the constitution that we have to work. So I hope that you also would have known about it. According to the constitution, they will work. There's a procedure. I believe that according to the constitution, this will happen in the future as well. But of course, we as the three forces, we will work according to the constitution and we will protect the state. That is what we are going to do, what we have been doing and we will do in the future as well.
The Defence Secretary was then asked to confirm whether the former Premier Mahinda Rajapaksa is being kept at the Trincomalee Navy base, to which he replied saying that as a former president, he was entitled to adequate security.
Prime Minister, as I mentioned earlier, he was evacuated to Trinco Naval Dockyard and he's there. And within a couple of days' time, when the things are normalized, he will be given it adequate security because he's entitled for that, being a former president, and he will be taken to whatever the place as per his consent.
Further, the Defence Secretary was also asked to explain how the shoot-to-kill order works out and if military personnel will actually take shots at civilians.
We don't fire at civilians. We start with warning shots. Warning shots mean you have the weapon rounds are inside, we aim at the sky and release 1 or 2 shots. Those are the warning shots. If the mob is more violent and their intention is a malicious intention of killing our own fellow citizens, then even with that, police will try their level best. I underline the word try their level best to shoot couple of shots below the knee level. So that is the procedure here. Unfortunately, if it hits the stomach or something, right? Because every policeman is not a marksman. If I employ a sniper or a marksman, of course, yes, we can ensure, okay, it is the knee or below the knee. But these are policemen, and we try our level best to shoot below the knee, but after firing warning shots.
Now, 6 people were injured following a shootout that took place near the residence of the chairman of the Ratgama Pradesh Sabha. Further, the police have fired warning shots in the air to control a tense situation that erupted in Angoda last night, where police and army personnel came under attack.
Several shootings were reported from some areas yesterday, despite the curfew being in effect island-wide. One such incident was reported from Angoda last evening. A group of people have attacked 2 police officers and 2 army personnel who came to take away a bus damaged by the violence. The army personnel have managed to flee amidst the attacks. However, the group of people have tried to set fire to the bus with police officers inside it. When the officer in charge of Mulleria police station have arrived at the scene with more police officers, the group had then attempted to set fire to his vehicle as well. It was then that warning shots were fired into the sky by the police to control the situation. However, the bus was still set on fire by the group after the police left the area. Meanwhile, in the southern province, a shootout took place in Ratgama in Gaul last night when a group of people attempted to attack the residence of the chairman of the Ratgama Pradesh Sabha. 6 people were injured by gunshots fired by a group inside the PS chairman's residence. Later, the attackers had entered the residence and set it ablaze. Despite this, the PS chairman along with his family members had managed to escape to safety. In the meantime, member of Frontline Socialist Party, Duminda Nagamu, alleged that the armed forces are poised to shoot at members of the general public after provoking them. His comments come in a backdrop where the Minister of Defence has announced that armed forces have been ordered to open fire on any person involved in looting public property or causing physical harm to others. However, Army Commander General Shavendra Silva denied his allegations, stating that it is highly misleading. Issuing a statement, the Army Commander assured that members of the armed forces would not resort to any such disgraceful acts under any circumstances. In the meantime, the remains of the late SLPP parliamentarian Amarakirti Atakorala, who died in a shootout in Nittambu on Monday, were brought to his residence in Polonnaruwa during the early hours of the day. Further, remains of a 27-year-old youth who also died in the shootout was brought to his residence in Medigama today.
Police officers have been given the clearance to use lethal force in instances of vehicle searches by unruly mobs or violent groups and incidents of damaging public or private property, looting and assault. Violent incidents so far have claimed the lives of 9 people, damaging a massive number of properties since the 9th of May.
Last night, a tense situation erupted in Negombo as a group of people attacked shops and residences near the Avendra Garden Hotel. Further, CCTV footages from the area showed the group resorting to stealing goods from the shops they attacked. However, The situation was brought under control with the arrival of the members of the clergy and army personnel into the area.
ඊයේ දිනේදී මීගමුව ප්‍රදේශයේ ඇතිවෙච්ච කලාකාරී තත්වයට දෙපිරිසක් අතර විශේෂයෙන්ම කණ්ඩායම් දෙකක් අතර ඇතිවෙච්ච තත්වය යටතේ අපේ ප්‍රදේශයටත් හමුදාවේ කණ්ඩායම් යදවුවා බලෑනියක් යොදලා තිබෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ අවස්ථාවේදීම අපිට කියාව ලැබුණා ඒක සමතයකට පත් කරගන්න මේ වෙනකොට ඒ තත්වය සම්පූර්ණයෙන් සමතයකට පත් කරලා තිබෙනවා.
In the meantime, more residences owned by the parliamentarians who are close allies of the Rajapaksa family were set on fire and damaged. Last evening, a residence owned by former Minister Johnston Fernando in Thalangama was torched by a group of people. Last Monday, the residence of former Minister Prasanna Ranatunga was also set ablaze as well. Further, a group of people also attacked the house of SLPP MP UK Sumit in Kurunagal last night. Meanwhile, in Tangol, the Carlton preschool was also damaged last night. In Colombo, the office of Avant-Garde Maritime Services was also attacked by a group of people yesterday. As the incidents of damage and looting continue, the Sri Lanka police said that all police stations have been instructed to exercise maximum force to prevent vehicle searches by unruly mobs or violent groups and to prevent incidents of damaging public or private property, looting and assault. In a statement, the police media division said that police officers have been directed to open fire when necessary to prevent such incidents. Further, the police also said that 59 social media groups used to gather people for violent incidents since the 9th of May have been identified and that investigations are underway to initiate legal action against the admins of these groups. In the meantime, Army Commander General Shavendra Silva and Inspector General of Police C.D. Vikramaratne arrived to record statements at the Human Rights Commission today in response to the summons issued to them to inquire as to why they failed to maintain rule of law during violence that took place last Monday.
සම්බන්ධ සිදුවීමේදී යුද හමුදාවක් ඇඳවන්නේ පොලිස්පතිවරයා විසින් ඒ වන විට ඒ සිද්ධිය වෙලා අවසන් ඒ පිළිබඳව දැනගන්න උන්ට ස්ථිර කරා ගන්න තමයි කන්දවල තිබ්බේ.
And we'll be back with more local stories right after this short break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Now, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has taken to Twitter to say that now is the time for all Sri Lankans to join hands as one to overcome the economic, social and political challenges. In a Twitter message, he also urged all Sri Lankans to reject any subversive attempts to push them towards racial and religious disharmony. Promoting moderation, toleration and coexistence is vital, the President added. The President is currently addressing the nation in the midst of the crisis. Now, the US State Department has expressed a concern over the deployment of the Sri Lankan military to contain the unrest that broke out in Sri Lanka on Monday. State Department spokesman Ned Price said the US stresses that peaceful protesters should never be subjected to violence or intimidation, whether on the part of the military force or civilian units. The United States has expressed deep concerns about the deployment of military in Sri Lanka and the reports of escalating violence in the island. The US State Department has also called for a comprehensive investigation, arrests and prosecution of anyone instigating and involved in acts of violence. Spokesperson Ned Price, speaking yesterday, urged the Sri Lankan government and political leaders to work quickly to ensure public safety and work together to implement solutions for long-term economic and political stability and to address the people's discontent over the economic crisis.
We're concerned by the deployment of the military. We stress that peaceful protesters should never be subject to violence or intimidation, whether that's on the part of a military force or a civilian unit. More broadly, we're deeply concerned by reports of escalating violence in Sri Lanka over the past few days. We condemn, as I said before, violence against peaceful protesters. We call for a full investigation, arrest, and prosecution of anyone instigating and involved in acts of violence. We are, as I said before, also closely monitoring the deployment of troops, something that is of concern to us, and we're also closely following political developments in the situation on the ground in Sri Lanka after the resignation of the Prime Minister. We urge the government and political leaders to work quickly to ensure public safety and work together to identify and implement solutions to achieve long-term economic and political stability in Sri Lanka. The government must address the Sri Lankan people's discontent over the economic crisis, including power, food, and medicine shortages, as well as their concerns about the political future of their country.
In the meantime, the Indian High Commission has rejected claims that it has helped airlift former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family out of the country. In addition, the High Commission also rubbished talk of Indian military intervention in Sri Lanka, saying that this was never a policy of the Indian government. The Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka yesterday refuted as fake and blatantly false local social media speculation that former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his family members have fled to India just days after he quit as Premier amidst unprecedented anti-government protests. The High Commission noted rumours circulating in sections of media and social media that certain political persons and their families have fled to India, calling them fake and blatantly false reports devoid of any truth or substance. The High Commission added that it strongly denies them, the statement said. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's top civil aviation official yesterday rejected social media speculation and asserted that he was not involved in the illegal transport and removal of any person or persons from Sri Lanka. Director General and CEO of the Civil Aviation Authority of Sri Lanka, Captain Themi Abevikrama, in a statement, described the social media reports as false allegations. Termed speculative reports in sections of social media about India deploying troops to Sri Lanka. In its official Twitter handle, the High Commission stressed that these reports and such views are not in keeping with the position of the Government of India, adding that it is fully supportive of Sri Lanka's democracy, stability and economic recovery. Now, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet is calling on the authorities in Sri Lanka to prevent further violence and urged restraint and meaningful dialogue to address the grievances of the population. Further, the European Union too has issued a statement condemning the recent vicious attacks against peaceful protesters in Colombo. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet yesterday called on the authorities in Sri Lanka to prevent further violence and urged restraint and meaningful dialogue to address the grievances of the population amidst the severe economic crisis in the country. Bachelet, in a statement, said that she was deeply troubled by the escalation of violence in Sri Lanka after supporters of the Prime Minister attacked peaceful protesters in Colombo on the 9th of May and the subsequent mob violence against members of the ruling party. Bachelet also condemned all violence and called on the authorities to independently, thoroughly and transparently investigate all attacks that have occurred, pointing out that it was crucial to ensure that those found responsible, including those inciting or organizing violence, are held to account. The High Commissioner also said that the authorities, including military personnel deployed in support of security forces, should exercise restraint in policing the situation and ensure that measures adopted in the context of the state of emergency comply with international human rights norms and are not used to stifle dissent or hinder peaceful protests. The state has a responsibility to ensure the right to life and to exercise due diligence to protect the lives of individuals against violence by private individuals or entities, she concluded. Meanwhile, the European Union and its 27 member states have stated that they are monitoring developments in Sri Lanka closely. The statement also condemns the recent vicious attacks against peaceful protesters in Colombo, which triggered further violence after a month of peaceful demonstrations had shown, despite some isolated incidents, that Sri Lankans are able to exercise peacefully their right to freedom of expression. The EU added that it also deplores the loss of life, including that of a member of parliament, and the high number of injured people. The EU has also called on the authorities to initiate an investigation into the events and to hold accountable those instigating or perpetrating violence, while urging all parties to refrain from violence and to show restraint. Now, the International Monetary Fund says that its technical talks with Sri Lanka will continue in preparation for policy discussions once a new government is formed.
The International Monetary Fund says that technical level discussions between its officials and Sri Lankan authorities will continue in order to be ready for talks once a new government is formed, though it is concerned about the rising social tensions and unrest. Masahiro Nozaki, the fund's mission chief for the country, said in a statement that the International Monetary Fund is closely following developments in Sri Lanka and is concerned about rising tensions and violence. Nozaki added that technical level discussions between IMF officials and Sri Lankan authorities have started will continue in order to be ready for policy discussions once a new government is formed. He also added that during the virtual mission during the 9th to 23rd of May, discussions at technical level have just started and continue as planned so as to be fully prepared for policy discussion once a new government has been formed.
Welcome back. Now, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe has issued an ultimatum to all political parties, saying that unless political stability is reached soon, there may not be much chance of recovering from the economic crisis. He adds that he may have to quit if stability is not reached soon.
When I took over this position about a month ago, we had this economic issues and we were facing balance sheet crisis at that point with the expectation of turning around the situation with some policy measures and with the IMF and with this that is occurring. The early expectation was that while we are embarking on this kind of turning around economic policy program and macro program and all some measures, as I mentioned at the beginning, I also expected kind of a political stability within a short period of time. So that was the expectation at that time. But unfortunately, even after 1 month, we don't see a clear improvement and progress towards addressing on one part social unrest, another part political stability. It has got worsened, and the events that happened last Monday escalated the instability towards a different level, unfortunately. So that is the situation now we are in. So that's why I thought our expectations, to manage expectations, what we have been trying to do and how to manage situation, I think we intend to have this media conference. අතර මං විශේෂයෙන්ම මගේ පණිවිඩය දැන් කියලා තියෙනවා හැමෝටම තීලම දේශපාලන පක්ෂවල අයට ඒ අය එකතු වෙලා යම් කිසි ආකාරයක ස්ථාවර තත්ත්වයක් ගේන්නේ නැත්නම් ඒක මමද කවුද ඉන්නේ කියන එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ කාටවත් බෑ මේ රට ගොඩ ගන්න ආර්ථික වශයෙන්. ඒතකොට එහෙම අරාජික වෙන රටක නීතිය හා සාමය හරියට ක්‍රියාත්මක නොවන රටක ස්ථාවර දේශපාලන යම් කිසි ක්‍රමවේදයක් නොමැති රටක මහ බැංකුව අධිපති වශයෙන් කවුරු හිටියත් ඒක දෙක කරන්න අමාරුයි.
Now, in the run-up to his national address this evening, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has held talks with UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe. During the talks, the former Prime Minister has requested the President not to obstruct protesters at Gorface Green. Further, Wickremesinghe and President Rajapaksa have discussed the ongoing crisis situation and the economic turmoil in the country. In the meantime, opposition leader Sajid Premadasa says that he is willing to be premier of an interim government if President Gotabaya Rajapaksa steps down from his position.
The question now is who will be the next Prime Minister. The seat is vacant at the moment following the resignation of former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa last Monday. What's more, the cabinet too is empty as all ministers resigned after the resignation of PM Rajapaksa. Political parties, the Bar Association and the civil society organizations urge the formation of an interim government comprising of all members of all political parties. Today, some party leaders expressed their willingness to take on the premiership of the all-party government, however, under certain conditions. Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa says he is willing to be the Prime Minister of an interim government if President Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns from his position.
මේ රටේ අතිමහත් බහුතර ජනතාවගේ ඉල්ලීම ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිවරයා ඉල්ලාස්වීම. ඔහුගේ ඉල්ලාස්වීමේ පදනම මත අපි සූදානම් මේ රටේ වගකීම් බාර ගන්න.
Further, General Secretary of Sri Lanka Freedom Party Dayasri Jayasekara also said that his party too will support Sajid Premadasa if he is willing to be the premier of the interim government.
ඒක කරගන්න හිමින් ඉස්සෙල්ලා අගමැතිකම බාර අරගන්නේ ඉදිරි ටික කියන්න ඕනේ ජනාධිපතිතුමාට යන්න කියලා. නැතුව ජනාධිපතිතුමාත් නැතුව ගියොත් අගමැතිත් නැතුව ගියොත් රට කවුද බාර ගන්න? ඉස්සෙල්ලා මේ ප්‍රශ්න ටික විසඳගෙන තමයි පාර්ලිමේන්තුව ගන්නවන්න ඕනේ. නැත්නම් අනිත් පාර ආයිත් ගුටි කන්න වෙනවා අපිට.
විපක්ෂ නායකවරයා තමාගේ වගකීම් ඉටු කළ යුතුයි. ඉන් අනතුරුව එන විසඳුමට මේ හැමදෙනාමත් සහයෝගය දෙනවා. එසේ නැත්නම් සමගි ජන බලවේගයෙන් සුදුසුෙක් ඉදිරිපත් වෙන්න ඕන. තමන්ගේ කණ්ඩායමෙන් කෙනෙක් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නත් බැරි නම් අපි යෝජනා කරනවා ජාතික ලැයිස්තුව හරහා අලුත්ම චරිතයක් ගේන්න පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඔහුට බලය දෙන්න.
In the meantime, Jatika Jana Balawega list out their proposal for the country's current political situation.
පළමු කරුණ තමයි වර්තමාන ජනාධිපති ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ වහාම සිය ධූරයෙන් ඉවත් විය යුතුයි. මාස 6ක් තුල නව ජනවරමකින් නව ආණ්ඩුවක් පිහිටවිය යුතුයි. ඒ අතරතුර කාලය සඳහා తాවකාලික පාලන ව්‍යුහයක් ලෙස යම් ව්‍යුහයන් අපි යෝජනා කරනවා. ඒක අපි කරුණු දෙකක් කෙරෙහි අවධානය යොමු කරනවා. පළමු එක තමයි වත්මන් දේශපාලන අර්බුදය හා අරාජිකත්වය නිම කරමින් රට නව මඟකට ගැනීමේ වගකීම බාර ගැනීමට ජාතික ජන බලවේගයේ සූදානම්. හැබැයි පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේදී ජාතික ජන බලවේගයට අපේ මූලිකත්වයෙන් ආණ්ඩුවක් ගොඩනගා ගන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙන සහාය අනිත් පක්ෂ විසින් ලබා දිය යුතුයි. නොමැතිනම් කෙටි කාලයක් සඳහා වත්මන් පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුල අන්තර්කාලීන ආණ්ඩුවක් පිහිටුවා ගැනීම. එහිදී ජාතික ජන බලවේගයේ മന്ത്രിවරු එහි කොටස්කරුවන් නොවි විපක්ෂයේ සිට අපි සහාය දෙනවා.
And that's all the news we have for you tonight. We hope you join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.